The Little Rock Nine. 9 African American students who challenged segregation. On September 4, 1957, 9 African American students attempted to enter Central High School following the Supreme Court's monumental decision that segregation was unconstitutional. They were turned away by the National Guard but did not give up and fought for their right to an education. Their perseverance created a lasting legacy by opening the doors to African American students for years to come. In 1952, Thurgood Marshall argued before the Supreme Court that separate school systems for whites and blacks were inherently unequal and violated the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. The justices of the Supreme Court were divided over this issue and could not reach an agreement. They decided to rehear the case in December 1953. During the intervening months, Chief Justice Fred Vinson died and was replaced by Governor Earl Warren of California. After the case was reheard in 1953, Chief Justice Warren was able to bring all the justices to agree to support a unanimous decision declaring segregation in public schools unconstitutional. On May 14, 1954, he announced the decision of the court, stating, "We conclude that in the field of public education, the doctrine of separate but equal has no place. Separate educational facilities are inherently unequal." At the time, Arkansas was one of the most advanced Southern states in regard to racial issues. The University of Arkansas School of Law was integrated in 1949 and the Little Rock Public Library in 1951. Even before the Supreme Court ruled segregation unconstitutional, the Little Rock School Board unanimously adopted a plan of integration to begin in 1957 at the high school level. In the spring of 1957, there were 517 black students who lived in the Central High School District. Upon hearing the school board's plan to integrate, 80 of these students expressed interest in attending Central High School and were interviewed by the Little Rock School Board. These candidates were then narrowed down to 17. From these 17, 8 decided to stay at the all-black Horace Mann High School. The 9 remaining students were ready to venture into Little Rock's premier high school. Not everyone in Arkansas was happy with the idea of integration. In August 1957, the Mothers League of Central High School won a temporary injunction from the county chancellor to block the integration of the school, saying that it could lead to violence. Federal District Judge Ronald Davies nullified the injunction on August 30th. On September 2, 1957, the day before classes began for the new school year, Arkansas Governor Orville Faubus called in the Arkansas National Guard to surround Central High School and not allow any black students to enter. When on public television, Faubus announced that these orders were to prevent violence to any citizens or property and to preserve the peace. The next day, Judge Davies ordered integrated classes to begin on September 4th. On September 4th, the 9 African American students tried to enter Central High School but were turned away by the National Guard. Over 400 white civilians gathered to protest the African American students and harassed them as they walked up to Central High School. 15-year-old Elizabeth Eckford was walking up to the school door when the mob began to threaten to lynch her. One fellow white classmate, Hazel Bryan, joined in the threats and racial slurs. The picture of Hazel shouting at Elizabeth is one of the most famous of the Little Rock Nine photographs because it shows the aggression of the white protesters. Faubus's deliberate defiance of Judge Davies' court order was the first major test of Brown versus the Board of Education and one of the main conflicts in the event of the Little Rock Nine. Faubus did not back down, so on September 20th, Judge Davies granted an injunction to NAACP lawyers Thurgood Marshall and Wiley Granton to impede the governor's use of the National Guard. Faubus had no choice but to withdraw the troops. On September 23rd, Central High School was again surrounded. but this time surrounded by Little Rock police officers there to escort the Little Rock Nine inside the school building amidst the protests. The police officers escorted the students in a side door unnoticed by the protesters. When the protesters learned that the Little Rock Nine were inside the building, they began to riot and challenge the police officers. Fearful that the crowds would get out of hand, school administrators escorted the Little Rock Nine out a side building of the school before noon. That evening, President Dwight D. Eisenhower issued a proclamation on live television stating that opponents of the federal court order must cease and desist, but the protesters were present at Central High School the next day. Tired of the protesters getting their way, Little Rock Mayor Woodrow Mann telegrammed Eisenhower on September 24th asking for his assistance in the matter. Immediately, President Eisenhower dispatched over 1,000 federal troops of the 101st Airborne Division to attend to Central High School. That same day, President Eisenhower issued Executive Order 10730. This executive order placed the Arkansas National Guard under federal control and allowed the U.S. Army to intervene to remove the protesters and their obstruction of justice. On September 9th, under the protection of federal troops, the Little Rock Nine were led in the front entrance of Central High School. Troops remained at the school throughout the year, but the Little Rock Nine were still subjected to verbal and physical assaults from a fraction of white students. The protesters never completely compromised their ideas over segregation. Rather, it was more of a submission to the authority of the U.S. government. The Little Rock Nine faced bullying and racism every day at Central High School, but they ultimately opened the doors of Central High School to African American students for years to come.